Hello, InvestorFuse community and other investors out there. We have a very special InvestorFuse case study guest today, Fernando Angelucci. He's in Chicago, Illinois, an investor out there, another younger guy like myself. Happy to bring him on. He's been with InvestorFuse from the beginning, and I stay in pretty close communication with him and his company. He's in a few different markets, and I'll open it up to him to give a further description and intro on himself, how he got into real estate, a little bit of his business breakdown. Fernando, how's it going, man?
Doing well, Los. How you doing?
Doing well, man.
So, I appreciate the introduction. So I'll kind of start with where I'm at right now, and then I'll kind of back up and tell you how I got started. So,
Perfect.
Right now what we do is we're in a few different markets. And I have a few different business segments. So we'll start with the one that most of your viewers are familiar with, is the wholesaling business. We're currently wholesaling properties in Chicago, Illinois, Indianapolis, Indiana, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, and then we were in Iowa, but we just recently closed down that market just because there's not enough population for the type of volume we want to be doing. On top of that, obviously the wholesale business is kind of what runs it's the fuel for the rest of the businesses we have. So we have a fix and flip business. Even though we've been doing a little bit less of those, just because our wholesale fees are usually half of what we would make if we were just to flip the property itself, and we make the fee usually in a week or two, as opposed to taking 6 months to 12 months. A perfect example is we got one up in Winnetka, which is it's the most expensive area in the Chicagoland area, and there's a deal where if we do the 12-month flip, we'll make about $300,000. But we ended up just wholesaling it in 2 weeks and made $78,000. So I figured the time value of that one's a little bit better, and not having to take the liability of flipping these mansions, So
sure, taking a quick nickel.
Yeah, so we don't do much in the flipping business. The third business is our rental portfolio. This is the real goal of what me and Stephen, my partner, Stephen Ware, do. And what all our resources ultimately drive towards. So we're buying rentals all over Chicago. We have rentals in Indiana as well. I just sold all my rentals in Iowa, and then we're looking to acquire rentals down in Dallas, Fort Worth, and then perhaps even Austin area as well, because those areas are on fire. So right now in the Chicagoland area, I think next week we're closing on 3 single-family homes in the south suburbs. Then we're closing on a 10-unit apartment building the week after that on the south side, and then we're closing on a 16-unit apartment building as well, either that week or the week after, following that one, also on the Chicago south side. Our average across those 5 buildings is a 32% cap rate. So, and that's before we start pushing rents and pulling down expenses. And all those deals basically came from either the wholesaling lead funnel or a strategy that we use now, where we're blasting out about 50 MLS offers a day, and to listings that have been sitting for 160, 180 days. And then instead of offering them cash, we say, hey, here's our cash price. It's extremely low compared to what you're asking. But if you're willing to do a short-term seller finance, maybe 2 to 3 years, 4% interest only with 5 to 10% down, we can get closer to your price. Just because these rentals we buy, they're distressed in multiple ways. Either usually the expenses are very high and the management is extremely poor, or they're just not utilizing where market rate rentals will be, or in Chicago specifically, Section 8, which is the government assisted housing. It's actually pretty sad. And maybe about 15, 20 years ago, we had a lot of properties that were participating in the Section 8 program, and they were kind of letting everybody into the program. And a lot of landlords got burnt because you get your money direct deposited the first of the month, but then when the tenant moved out, they destroyed the property. So what ended up happening was a lot of landlords decided to remove their properties from the participating properties list. So now there's actually a deficit of properties in the Chicagoland area. There's tons of voucher holders and not enough units to fill them. So what you're starting to see is, market rent in some areas for a 2 or a 3 bedroom can be, $800 to $1,100. But then as soon as you move over to Section 8, that jumps up to, $1,200 to $1,600, $1,700. So the disparity is really great. And then we also work with the Veterans Affairs Office. So all our Section 8 tenants, or we're trying to get all our Section 8 tenants, they're all veterans. Just because I'm sure anybody that's watching, I'm sure you've seen, you know, homeless people on the side of the road. And every time you see one that says, hey, I'm a homeless vet, it really does sting to see somebody that, you know, had potentially risked their life, and they don't even have the support system to get, you know, a place to live that's clean and safe. So that's what we do in the rental side of the business. And then the last company, which is the newest one that we just opened up, it's actually, it's similar to wholesaling, but on a much larger scale. So instead of us getting, you know, 1 or 4 or 20 unit apartment buildings, we're actually working on the 300 plus unit apartment buildings. And we're moving them to hedge funds, pension funds. We have a couple REITs that buy from us, sovereign wealth funds from different nations looking to invest. So for example, to give you a scale on those types of deals, we're working on one in Tennessee that's over 1,000 units with, you know, very high purchase price. These are all off market, and I had to sign a non-disclosure, so I can't give you like very detailed things about them, but that one's down in Tennessee. We got another one that's, you know, 500 plus units down in Dallas. Another one that's 1,400 units in Austin. Another one that's 1,500 units in Raleigh. And so that model is really nice because that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years. And you just add a couple zeros, and the underwriting doesn't take as much time. The only thing that really increases in time is the inspections of the property. You know, going through all 1,000 units is difficult, but the paychecks are much better. You know?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, and that's fulfilling stuff if you're able to help out, you know, veterans, people that fought for the country.
Yeah.
To rewind for a second, just for those listening, because I would say most of our audience is wholesaler, flipper type audience. Could you explain to some viewers what a cap rate is and how that affects you making offers on?
Yeah. So sure. So a cap rate is your non-leveraged return. So the easiest way to describe it would be your net operating income or your profit for the year. So rent minus expenses divided by your total capital in unleveraged. So that'd be your purchase price plus any rehab plus any closing costs, those types of things. That's going to give you your cap rate, which allows you to compare different asset classes or different properties that say they're both apartment buildings, but one's a 30 unit and one is a 16 unit or one's a 4 unit. It allows you to describe them across the same level. And I keep saying unleveraged because it's not your cash on cash return. I mean, if you buy the property cash, the cap rate and the cash on cash return are the exact same thing. But if you leverage and say you only put down, you know, like on the deals that I buy for my portfolio, you know, in most cases we're putting only 5 to 10% down. The bank or the seller is carrying the rest of the note. So on those type of deals, you know, our cap rate may be, call it 25%, but our cash on cash return is usually in the, you know, 70 to 100% per year, just because we make the amount of money we have in the deal back every year. So yeah, cap rate is just a measure of profitability on a rental property.
Sweet. Thanks for clarifying that for the audience there. One thing I want to do on this call too, if you're on your MacBook, I want to look at the calculation field for the offers where we were looking at where you can type in different numbers. We'll do that. We'll jump into that at some point when we start talking more InvestorFuse.
No problem.
He has an awesome analytical engineering type mind. So he has an offer calculator that he has built out that's really sweet. I was blown away by it when I saw it, but pretty much allows him to make different type of offers, which in my opinion, I mean, it makes you more competitive than other investors in Chicago, all these other areas that you're in, when you're able to present the sellers with different type of offers and really give them the highest offer possible, where you're able to make those returns that you and your company are making.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll go into that a little bit later. So once we go, because it's a little bit harder to describe to somebody that hasn't been exposed to this type of formulation when you're doing, you know, 2 or 3 option offers. But just to backtrack here, I know you mentioned the engineering background. So I'll kind of explain how I got started and how an engineer ended up, you know, getting into real estate.
Perfect.
So it started all when I was about 16 or 17 years old. I can't remember the exact year. I picked up a book of Rich Dad Poor Dad, like every other investor, you know, depending on your age group, it's either Carlton Sheets or it's Robert Kiyosaki, right?
Right.
So I read that book, and to give you further background on me, I'm a first generation American. Both my parents are immigrants from Brazil, and they moved to the United States during a time of hyperinflation over there, where currency was rapidly degrading. I mean, we're talking the day you got your paycheck, if you didn't go and spend it on groceries, you'd go back 1 or 2 days later, and the price of everything doubled. So that's the type of inflation, hyperinflation that we're talking about. But my parents, both very analytical based background. My father's a structural, civil, and environmental engineer. My mom works for an engineering company. And they kind of had the same type of mentality that I'm sure all the other first generations out there have experienced with their parents. They say, go to school, really kick butt, go get a good job, stay there for 40 years, retire and collect a pension, right? And as we know now, that's not the way that the economy works and not the way to wealth. So after I read that book, I was like, I don't think I'm going to go to college. And my dad was like, over my dead body, go get a degree, then you can go do whatever you want afterwards. So I went to the University of Illinois down in Champaign-Urbana. I started as a chemical engineer, and I switched over to ag bioengineering. When I graduated, I went and worked for a Fortune 50 chemical company. It was actually a pretty good gig. I moved out to Des Moines, Iowa. My starting salary was like 60 grand. I had a truck, expense account, pension, 401k match, the whole deal. So, for most people, for a 21-year-old, it was a pretty solid setup. However, it wasn't really a 9 to 5. It was more of a 5 to 9. I'd have to wake up at 5 in the morning, and then I'd have to drive all the way to the Mississippi River from Des Moines, and then work my way back across accounts. And I'd be working, like I said, close to 14 to 16 hours a day. And what really bothered me was the harder I worked, I didn't get incentivized to do that. Because it said, hey, you're on a salary. So you got to work whatever hours it takes to get that back. So what happened was I ended up deciding that that wasn't for me. And at the same time, all throughout college, I was reading books about real estate, going to seminars and events, and said, okay, let's put this into practice. So right before I quit, I started doing some research. I started doing some marketing, and I got my first deal under contract. Ended up wholesaling that deal after I quit my job. Made $2,500, and then I was like, wow, this actually works. But that being said, I have a pretty high, I was young, so my expenses were pretty high, and I said, I looked at my financials, and I had about 3 months runway, and I said, all right, what am I going to do? Because in 3 months, I'm not going to have money for rent or even groceries. So what I ended up doing, which I don't recommend anybody do, I applied for like 64 credit cards in one night, so that they'd all hit my credit report at the same time, and the other companies wouldn't realize that I was doing that. And I think I got like 12 or 16 of them accepted. And then the second I got the cards in, I cash advanced the maximum cash advance limit. So I took out something like $96,000 or $98,000 in credit card debt as a 22 or 23-year-old, So that was rough, but it helped me start. It really helped me start my business and get the startup capital that I needed. One of which was actually my CRM program. So I started wholesaling there. I flipped the house in Iowa. I told my partner now, Stephen Ware, who was my roommate in college, what I was doing and the money I started to make. He got interested. At the time, he was in the marketing and advertising field, working for some high-profile clients in the restaurant industry. Any Chicago people will know, Bona Beef. That was one of his accounts. So some high-profile names. And but he wasn't getting paid a lot, and he was really starting to get tired of the same style of red tape and, having to deal with bosses that don't understand and are just stuck in their old way. So I taught him how to start doing wholesaling here in Chicago. And the advertising marketing background, I don't know what it was. The guy's a genius. And he just started exploding in Chicago and said, hey, Fernando, I need you back here. It's really starting to kick up. So about 2.5 years ago, I moved back to Chicago. And that's when things really started to blow up. I think I went from close to, one deal every month or every 2 months to start, 4 to 5 deals a month. At the time, they were lower value deals. I was making 5 or 10 grand here or there. But as we started to really hone in our kind of negotiation process and also start to really get the follow-up game down, that's when we started getting a lot more profits. What we found out was we had a lot of deals that were falling through the cracks just because we weren't following up with people. We'd submit an offer, they get back to us when you're ready to move on. And then I'd end up calling them 3 or 4 or 5 months later, and they said, oh yeah, we sold to another investor, and they never even called me back. So that's when I realized, this giant desk covered in sticky notes and notebooks on notebooks wasn't working, and I needed to get a very good CRM in place. So I first started with Podio, just the base Podio, and then I built my own kind of automation on top of that with GlobiFlow, and that was working all right, but it wasn't giving me everything I needed. I remember one night it was like 2:30 in the morning, and I was just finishing up some work on Podio, and I was getting aggravated because my automations weren't working. And typing it in Google, some question that was very specific about an automation in GlobiFlow. And then boom, the very first ad that pops up is InvestorFuse. And it was like this little 2.5 minute video. And I was just sitting there in awe. I was like, oh my God, this is what I was trying to do. And they have it down, and it's a support system, and anything I need, I can ask. So that's why I ended up switching over with you. And I think at the time I was one of the first, 30 or so clients or something like that. So I remember I've seen a lot of your iterations, and it just keeps getting better and better. So that really helped us. And I this is not me just trying to toot your guys' horns, but they say every time your business grows 3 times its regular size, or every time you go up to a factor of 10, all your systems break, and you need to reevaluate the system. So I was at the point where my systems were breaking. We went from just me to me and 2 other individuals. And the Podio system we had wasn't working. So we moved to InvestorFuse, and that really allowed us to, close to quadruple our volume through our CRM systems. And then what I really loved is the follow-up sequencers, where I didn't have to mentally be taxed on remembering who I need to follow up with and who I don't. I just click a button, set it, and forget, and it was gone. So that's what I really loved about it. So that kind of brings us to where we are now. Wholesaling, we've moved maybe close to 5-10 properties a month in the summer. In the winter, during the colder times, we get better deals, but there's less volume. Probably somewhere between 3 to 5 deals a month, but at a higher profit margin. And like I said before, I know to some people starting, a $5,000 or $10,000 fee seems like a lot. And to me, it did too. My first deal was a $2,500 deal, and I thought I slammed it out of the park. But in the last 2 months, I closed a $50,000 deal in the north part of Chicago. I closed a $40,000 deal on the west part of Chicago, and I closed a $78,000 deal on the very far north of Chicago. So that's when I say big wholesale fees. That's what I'm talking about, where it makes more sense to just wholesale it than actually take on the risk and flip it yourself.
Absolutely. So talking to somebody that's in that beginning stage that is getting pumped up for those 5 to 10K deals, and you giving this advice on the type of spreads you're making now on wholesale fees, what do you think is attributing to that? I know you brought on marketing, negotiation. Experience is going to help you out. The more deals you have under your belt, the more confident you're going to be negotiating. But can you give a break? So, what do you think are the biggest variables for that?
Yeah, I'll tell you the number one biggest piece is the size of your cash buyer list. When I first came to Chicago, our cash buyer list here was maybe 500 or so investors. Now we're up to about 5,700 investors that buy off of us in the Chicago market. And then in addition to having a larger buyer list, start reaching out. A lot of people market, especially when wholesalers are starting off, they'll market just their properties in their own market. But what I found is the deals that I'm getting the highest spreads on, these are deals from buyers in very low cap rate states, if it's somebody buying the land to be a landlord, or very high appreciation states where it's impossible to find deals to flip. So for example, California, Colorado, Canada, Israel is now starting to really get on. I get a lot of calls from Israeli investors. South Africa, Germany. So all these areas where, for on a rental, 4% is amazing. I go market a deal that I got under contract for 24% return, and then I go market it out at 18, and they're ecstatic, and they'll be a repeat customer no matter what. So definitely number one, size of your buyers list, because so that comes for two reasons. Number one, you'll be able to make larger spreads, but then you'll also be able to, every one of us wholesalers, we have gotten that deal where they just won't accept our price. But it's still a good deal for, say, somebody that's buying on the retail market and is willing to do their own work, or it's marginal for some investors, but maybe there's some other investors that they have a lot of money behind them, and it really is just a capital preservation play. They're not really looking for a large return. They just want to make sure that they beat inflation. So these are the guys where what most investors would consider like this is a gray area deal, it's marginal at best. I can still move those and make $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 off to somebody else that has a different business model or exit strategy in mind. Perfect example is we had a deal that it was a rental property in Pilsen. Needed a lot of work to get it back. It was a marginal deal. I had a guy that came and he offered me a huge wholesale fee because his play, and I didn't even think about it, was to tear the entire thing down and just rebuild the property as like a luxury property in a hot area. And so he ended up turning that thing around when everybody else was, scoffing at me because they're only getting, whatever the return was, 8 or 9% in a very high appreciation area. So I'd say those are the two biggest factors that you have control over, would be building your buyers list, building the diversity in the buyers list. And just a couple tips for guys out there. If you're like, yeah, that sounds great, Fernando, how to build my buyers list. Here's some actionable items, okay? Number one, every time you get a property under contract or you're about to get a property under contract, go into the tax assessor website and literally pull the ownership of every property in, call it quarter mile radius to start. And what you'll start to see is you'll see John and Jane Doe, and then all of a sudden, Plan B investments, or you'll have, real estate, whatever, LLC, and you'll start to see these recurring. You're like, okay, this guy is a buyer. This guy has property. So you reach out to those guys. Some of the people that they have such a small farming area that they would never even come in contact with a wholesaler themselves because they only buy a few properties and they only buy in one neighborhood in all of Chicago, Second thing is start building up your team. I can't tell you the amount of value I've gotten out of my attorneys, my title rep, Brett Newsom over at Fidelity, David Courtwright. He runs his own law firm. Brett, I was looking for a list of some of, the 10 or 20 top producing real estate agents in all of Chicagoland area. And he ends up sending me an Excel sheet with the top 2,000 agents with all their contact information in the Excel sheet, number of volumes they've closed, where their office is, number of units. And that pumped up my cash buyer list by, close to 1,000 people after I went and segregated the people out that I didn't want to work with. And that's great because now when I have deals that say an investor is not a good enough deal for an investor, I shoot it out to my realtors and they'll have somebody that's willing to buy cash, not necessarily an investor, but maybe a business owner that owns an IT company and he has a bunch of cash and he lives in Naperville, but he's looking for just maybe 1 or 2 rental properties in the city of Chicago and he's willing to take a lower return. So that works out really well. So hit up your title guy and see if he can help you out with not only buyers, but or not only realtors, but then also buyers as well. Ask him to pull every transaction that has gone through his pipeline without his or her pipeline without a mortgage that was recorded on it. And then they can start pointing you in the direction of all these cash buyers that are buying and doing high volume. That's actually how I found one of my very high volume buyers that he buys, 2 or 3 properties off of me a month. And as long as the numbers make sense for him. So that's what I would do, immediately. And then another thing that I did, I'm like stealing all my secrets in here. So yeah, everybody take word except for the people in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Just don't listen to what I'm saying. Another thing I did was I went to ListSource and I pulled kind of the same thing that I was explaining with the title. I pulled a list of every cash transaction that happened over the last 3 years. And then I deleted all of them that are only one-time occurrences. So anybody that bought for cash in a 3-year period 2 or more times, I sent them a letter. At the time I had about 4 or 5 deals that I had just locked up. And so I described each one of the deals with a 1-line sentence in this mailer. And I sent out like 3,000 mailers to cash buyers in the Chicagoland area. And, a good portion of them responded asking if the deals were still available. And, by the time that I was starting after the first 2 weeks, all the deals were gone. But that was even better because I said, actually, I'm sorry, those deals, they're already gone. But, if you give me your contact information, I'll hit you up first when I get a deal that matches your criteria.
Absolutely. Some great actionable steps there for building your buyers list.
Yeah.
I think one of the things too, like InvestorFuse, one of our key values, beliefs is really trying to build a system for the overwhelmed real estate investor. Like, you're up at 2:30 in the morning, worrying about Globiflow breakdown, stuff like that. But really we want to leverage your time, to do with it what you please, spend time with friends, family, but also for higher leverage business activities like that. If you're working a 15-hour a day job like your last one, you're not going to be able to meet up with these probate attorneys or, mortgage people, all these realtors, if you're working 15 hours every single day.
Right.
And this is like, someone needs to be at the top of the company to be doing that and meeting with these people, building relationship, using your rapport building techniques with these people, seeing what value you can provide to them, and then they'll provide value back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of rapport, just because this is my new favorite book, anybody wants to learn how to negotiate based off emotion as opposed to logic. I read a lot of books. I go through maybe 1 or 2 books every week or two. There's a lot of books out there that teach negotiation as if everybody would act logically. And what I found is that is not the best case. And I found this one book written by Chris Voss, who used to be the lead hostage negotiator for the FBI. And the name of the book is called Never Split the Difference, because in his line of work, there was no such thing as meeting in the middle. When we're talking about a human life, it's either I get the guy back, I get my way, or the deal is unsuccessful, right? So one book that I recommend to everybody out there that's looking to help, to increase their negotiation power, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'll definitely put that in the show notes. Super interesting stuff to me too. Like, humans are just such emotional beings. Like, we're not like robots. Like, it's such emotional things. If somebody likes you genuinely, they're more likely to do business with you. They're going to assume everything you do is in a good light, as opposed to if they're neutral to you or don't like you. So same thing with
absolutely.
And how much of your real estate business you do negotiations with sellers or getting financing, partners?
Constantly. I'm never not negotiating, right?
Yeah, everything is a negotiation.
Right.
Awesome.
Exactly.
It's actionable steps there. And I know for your wholesaling business, you're in Chicago, but you're also managing another workspace in Texas, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we stopped doing our marketing to Indiana and Florida for the moment, just because we got a lot going on in Chicago and in Dallas, which is our newest venture. How we usually do is we just partner with somebody that they're either familiar with wholesaling, or maybe they're a fix and flipper, which is in this case was the case with my partner, Nick Messer. And they have the drive. They just don't have basically they're trying to reinvent the wheel again. So what I do is I partner with them. I pay for their marketing. I show them how we got the size that we're at. And then that's basically my partner that has the boots on the ground. I've heard multiple stories of wholesalers working completely remote with no partner, doing contractors and stuff. If they can do it, that's great. But what I have found out is that's very hard to do unless you have a partner that has equity with his or her boots on the ground to really manage things. And then again, just to do the negotiations. Contractors are contractors. Some of them are good at negotiation, most are not, right? It's just the how it is. And then especially if you're relying on realtors, that's again, the biggest thing about running a business is you always have to be running it lean. Always be trying to increase your income in any other way possible, trying to maximize the income per lead. So say maybe it's a lead that you can't take on yourself, that you can refer to somebody for a referral fee. And then what I find is even more importantly is really tracking your expenses and cutting them, ruthlessly. I went through maybe 2 or 3 different iterations of mailing systems until I found one out in Ohio. The guy is amazing. Steve Mayer, Bottom Line Inc. The guy is really good, and his systems are amazing, and he gets all of our mailings. I can handle any volume that we do, and his pricing is fantastic. So that's one of the things that I think is very important when you're running any business, not just only a wholesale business, but us as wholesalers, we tend to kind of, just because it's so transactional in nature, and you don't know when the next paycheck is coming in, it's very hard to not only track expenses and track income, but then just to have the wherewithal to know what the numbers mean. Another great feature that you guys just recently rolled out was that KPI tracker, where I can put in specific campaigns, and especially because, for me, it's not that I'm just doing 1 or 2 campaigns at any given time. I have 12 to 16 separate campaigns going out. So I think think my call rail is now up to like 36 phone numbers that get leads that are pushed through them, you know? So it's one of those things where like in the beginning, when I have like just a probate campaign, I'm starting out only doing 200 mailers, you know, a month. It works. But now to the point where we're doing 10,000 to 15,000 mailers a month per market, it gets very difficult to track unless you're able to automate it all, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you on that. So, great nuggets there on running a business. Staying on that subject, you're growing now. You're selling properties to international buyers, multiple markets, you know, big unit apartments. What type of hires do you see yourself doing in the next 12 months? What type of people do you see bringing onto your team in, you know, Chicago, Texas area?
Yeah, so Texas is growing really fast. Texas is a little bit different than our Chicago market because one of our main buyers is actually a hedge fund themselves. They buy rental properties that fit a certain amount of criteria, and it allows us to offer. We're usually the highest offer when we're only competing against investors, and that's because they buy at such a low cap rate compared to what a typical investor does. So down there, they're starting to grow a lot, and they really need to bring on new people. I believe that they're going to be pushing out. They're going to be getting like an administrative assistant here pretty soon. Same thing in Chicago. So right now it's me and Steven. We're the owners, and then we have our partner Brian, who's our acquisition manager. And he was able to handle everything pretty good up until recently. He actually just had his first baby, and so he's a stay-at-home dad, which you know real estate allows us to do, but it has severely cut down on his available time, which is fine, right? Because what's the purpose of? I mean, why do we do all this, right? So
Exactly.
that we have the freedom to spend with our family and friends. Okay. So what we're probably going to do is we're going to be hiring a new administrative assistant to kind of take a load off of Brian, and that person is going to basically be the podial person or the InvestorFuse person. They're going to be sitting on the computer the entire time. They're going to be taking calls as they come in. They're going to be entering in all the information onto the lead sheets, onto the property sheets, and then they're going to be gauging motivation, you know, cold, warm, hot, and then sending us the leads in that order. You know, the hot leads we're going to go see right away. The warm leads we're going to call. You know, one of the principals, me or Steve, are going to call and gauge if it's worth our time to go do a showing or just make an offer right there on the phone. And then all of our cold leads, they get an offer immediately. And if it's at somewhere in the ballpark, that's when we go and see the property, and then we'll adjust our offer based on the repairs. You know, we always take them at their word if they say, which is, you know, it's usually not the best thing to do, but it gives us negotiating leverage. We say, hey, we can make an offer with you based on what you think the repairs of the property, but you know, when we go there with our contract or we go there with our repair cost estimate sheets, if it doesn't match what you said, say you only, you know, we budgeted $10,000 in rehab because you said everything was perfect, but all we had to do was update one bathroom. You find out that we go there and it's actually a $90,000 rehab. We're dropping that price to you by $80,000 or even more. So it's important I think it's important to have somebody, once you get up to a higher size, maybe close to, I think when we started needing a third person was when we hit about 5,000 letters a month per market. That's when it was too much for just two people to handle, to do the showings and the negotiations and all the data entry and all that stuff. So I think that's extremely important, just because, like you said, InvestorFuse enables you to leverage your time. And as the owners of the business, our time is best spent negotiating hot deals and networking for referral partners and money, right? Those are the two things: networking and negotiation, final negotiations, not just the feel of something's out there, but we know we have a buyer on the line. Now let's really zero in on what the price needs to be for it to be worth our time.
Awesome. And you're involved on both of those, the A to B leg and the B to C leg. So, I mean, you're doing like, you know, 100 unit and bigger apartment complex acquisitions, as well as like disposition side on the wholesale deals and everything. So you're involved in both of those, and also kind of leveraging your extremely valuable time on doing the networking, finding buyers, all that stuff.
Yeah. So I'd say now my time is primarily networking. I usually have anywhere between 5 to 7 new meetings a week that I'm meeting new either partners, investors, wholesalers, lenders, title agents, whatever you want. And then also the disposition side, dealing with the cash buyers, making sure they're happy, dealing with our VIPs, which are the guys that buy, 2 to 3 properties per month from us, and really making sure that they're feeling happy. And that's another tip I would give to you guys. In the beginning, you'll hear a lot of gurus or podcasts state, don't be a CB, don't be a cash buyer employee, don't give anybody preferential treatment. And I'd say, yes, in the beginning, that's true. But then you're going to start getting these investors where they're so comfortable doing businesses with you that, the process is so easy. So, for example, I have a couple investors that I'll tell them about the deal. I'll tell them what I have it at on contract. And they say, okay, I want it. And I don't even have to go send an assignment to contract. We'll all get the paperwork done, but all I really have to do is tell them the address and then my wiring information. And they wire my $15,000 fee into my account like that because they trust me. And now it's something that would have taken me 3 to 4 weeks to get paid on immediately. I hand off the entire deal to the seller and to the buyer. They finish the rest of the transaction. My fee is nowhere on the HUD because it's paid out of closing. So the seller doesn't see, what I'm making. And it's done. And so those guys, I'll anytime that somebody's a volume player in my list and they make the biggest thing, like you said, it's all about time. They make my life easier and they free up my time. So I don't have to be an intermediary and chasing paperwork and all this other, asinine things. I'm willing to give you a discount. I'll tell the price for everybody is a $15,000 assignment fee, but junior, you get it for 12 because that $3,000 that I'm giving up is I can go out and make another 15 with the time that you freed up for me. Right.
Right. And he'll continue to buy deals from you, especially if you're hooking off shaving off a little bit of a assignment fee there. Yeah.
So make sure that, you're going to have your buyer list and you're going to be developing it. And anybody that already has a pretty large buyer list, you'll realize that of that list, maybe 10% to 15% will buy in your entire time that you are, connected with them. And then of that, maybe of your total list, maybe 1% or less are going to be your active buyers where you know their criteria. They'll buy from you right away. There's not going to be any issues. And those are the type of people, that 1% are the type of people you really want to form good relationships with, not just a working relationship, but, for example, one of my cash buyers, I've already gone to his house for Sunday dinner and barbecue 3 or 4 times, awesome. Any type of deal that he's even getting from a different investor that's out of his wheelhouse, he calls us. So for example, we were looking at a self-storage deal the other day on the west side. He said, hey, Fernando and Steven, I know you guys are very familiar with self-storage. You guys talk about it all the time. Can you go get eyes on this before I buy it from this wholesaler? And I said, sure. Yeah, I'll go. I'm going to go be looking at properties over there anyway. Might as well stop by and do an analysis for you, right? So that's really nice because then they start looking out for you. And, I'm a big believer in having an abundance mentality versus a scarcity mentality. And this is kind of a throwback to Robert Kiyosaki, anybody that's gone through like his line of books. The scarcity mentality investors, or let's talk about wholesalers in general. So the scarcity mentality wholesalers, these are the guys that they're going to try to pinch every little penny out of their cash buyer. They're going to try to get the deal to the point where it was a good deal and now it's just like a marginal deal. It might be an okay deal. The problem with that is those guys, maybe they'll make more money than you for the first year or year and a half, but our industry is such a small one, such a tight-knit community where eventually word travels that you're a scarcity mindset style investor or wholesaler, and then just nobody wants to do business with you anymore, especially if you make it extremely difficult. There was somebody that we had to stop doing business with because not only was it pulling teeth every time we tried to deal with him, but after we had verbal confirmation of what we agreed to as a fair price, this and that, I'd send over the contract and then he'd send it up signed, but the price was marked up and he tried to get rid of another $4,000 or $5,000 off my fee as if like I wouldn't notice the giant red line in his initials on my contract. That type of stuff. Or like right before we go to closing, we already have a contract in place, but he threatens not to close so that, I lose the contract and then he just goes to the seller immediately. These are the types of people where you not only have to get them off the list, but I would actively, anybody that burns me, any investor that talks to me, I'll tell them exactly what happened. I'll tell the guy's name. I'll give him his contact information. So say, if you ever see this phone number, hit your email box, your phone, just ignore it because this guy's going to burn you. So it's one of those things where like, maybe it's not nice of me to do that, but like I care for the investors I work with. And if I got burned, somebody else doesn't need to get burned. They can learn from my from my failure, and vice versa. People can learn from my successes, and that's how I grew so fast, was, trying not to invent the wheel and just finding people that were 5 or 10 years ahead of me of where I wanted to be, and saying, hey, what did you do that you really messed up on, and how do I avoid losing money like you did?
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to be an abundance mentality investor. I was actually coaching a new wholesaler the other day, I think like 2 days ago, on the phone. And any wholesalers out there, if you guys want to talk to me, give me a call. My cell phone is 630-408-8090. I'm sure you'll put all the rest of my contact information in the notes. I drive a lot, and that's basically dead time for me. I'm just listening to books. So if you ever have any questions of how to grow your list from 20 to 200 or 200 to 2,000, or want to know how to negotiate, just give me a call and I'll tell you. And so this kid that called me, young guy, he asked me to say, hey, what do I do? I'm getting these deals, but I can't move them. And my list is so small. And it seems like I can't really make any money on the deals that I do try to put out. And I told him, hey, go get a couple deals. Easiest way to find buyers is to market deals. That's number one. If you have the deals, they will come. And on your first or 2 or 3 deals, take way less than you should, so that everybody in the community knows that you're the guy for the fattest wholesale deals. This guy that, they know when they hear Fernando, they know that he leaves a ton of meat on the bone for his investors, right? So, I mean, this happens all the time. It's crazy how I'll go to networking events all the time, and I'll introduce myself, and somebody will come up afterwards like, you're Fernando. I get emails from you all the time. Like, I see your work all over the place. It's finally nice to put a face to the name. So that type of stuff. So I have a good reputation in the area.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm loving all that. The abundant mindset. Sounds like a little bit of delayed gratification from my perspective there, where you're gonna take a little less, but you're building that relationship, and then as long as it's smooth sailing from there, you're gonna be selling them deals however long you're in the investing game. And I'm glad you went to the cash buyers breakdown too. I was gonna ask you, since we're talking about building your buyers list, how valuable that is to a wholesaler and an investor. Just for you to run back through that breakdown real quick, and then any closing words, anything you want to end with. But you have about 5,700 cash buyers. And what I wanted to ask is, like, everybody has a quote unquote buyers list.
Right.
But sometimes that's just, people, they may not even know if that's a legit investor or buyer or whatever.
Oh yeah.
But you said about 1% of that, 1% of the 5,700 is people that you like actually know, may have sold a deal to. So that 5,700 would be like 50 people. 57.
Yeah. So yeah, like around, I'd say in my list, and my numbers are even a little bit lower because I've really started to choose who I want to work with. When I first started, you don't have that ability to choose which investors you work with, because usually you only have one investor making an offer on your property. And if they're just a complete, knucklehead, and they're going to toss you around, you just have to take it, because that's the only buyer. But usually on every one of my deals that I send out, I have anywhere between 12 and 20 offers, and I get to select which ones I want. And then anybody that I've already had a bad situation with, I just delete them off my list. I mean, I don't want to deal with you if you're going to cause my life to be, a living hell. So of my 5,700, I would say about 500 are active real estate investors. Not necessarily that they're buying from me, but I see them buying from other wholesalers. I see them buying on the MLS. I see them closing transactions at the title company I work with. Of that 5,700, I'd say between 25 and 40 of them are like my repeat guys. They buy more than one deal from me. For me to consider you a VIP now, my criteria are a little bit more strict. Like the guys that when I go like rent a yacht for all my cash buyers to do like an appreciation event, I'll only invite like 12 to 15 of them. Those are the guys that buy multiple deals for me throughout the year. But in the VIPs, I also consider anybody that has bought 2 or 3 deals from me in a year, because they're a repeat buyer. They know how I work. I know how they work. So I'd say, anywhere between about 25 and 40 of them are the guys that I really focus on. Those are the guys that before I even send out an email blast to the entire list, I call them a day before as I'm leaving the property and got a verbal acceptance saying, hey, Michael, I got this deal. Here's what I locked it up on a contract for. What are you willing to pay me for this one? And I don't even try to hide it. I say, here's what I got. What are you willing to pay? Letting you know I'm going to call 12 guys right after you. So just don't lowball me, right?
Yeah, man, a ton of great nuggets here. I want to make sure we're getting all these down. People need to be listening to this carefully. But one thing too, like right there, and I feel like this is taught in like by gurus or maybe other mentors that are wholesalers. Like, there's this approach where you should where when you're negotiating with seller leads, you're saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a cash buyer. You know, I have it right in my, you know, I could wire it into you right to you today."
Yeah.
Or, you know, most of the case with most wholesalers, that's not the case. And
Right.
you can take the transparent approach, which works a lot better. I mean, you're on that with both legs, with the seller and with your buyers, especially. You tell them, "Hey, I have the contract right here. I'll send you over the contract I have. What are you willing to pay me as an assignment fee on that?" There's a lot of
Yeah.
power.
And here's a little nugget that I learned early on from a wholesaler that took me under his wing when I was still starting out in Des Moines. Because I've had a deal where this is like the worst case scenario, right? This is a wholesaler's nightmare. You show up to the closing table or your attorney's closing for you. The seller all of a sudden sees the HUD and sees that you're making more money than what they're getting back when they thought that number was the highest you can go. And then they decide that they don't want to close. Legally, they're not allowed to do that, but you're not going to go sue somebody for $5,000 because it's not going to be worth your time and it's going to cost you as much that you're going to make in legal fees, right? So what I tell sellers now, I say, "Hey, listen, I'm a cash buyer. I can buy this myself. I do look for the best of the best deals though. So if this doesn't match my criteria or I'm closing on too many properties at the same time where I'm cash poor, what I do is I work with a network of about 5,700 investors in the Chicagoland area. And what they do is they will actually give me equity for sourcing them the deal. So even though I'm putting a contract with you under Fernandos LLC, or C Corp, we're going to, I'm actually going to sign this contract to one of my investors, and I'm going to get equity for that deal, whatever we negotiate. And just to let you know, I may even just get cashed out of my equity at closing because they would rather have a higher profit margin after they rehab the property and sell it, or after they rehab it and rent it, and they just want to pay me my equity out on the lower valuation in the beginning. So if you see, you know, some type of charge there, and I'll let you know if that's going to be happening or not, if I'm going to be taking it down myself, that's what it is. It's one of my partners. They don't think that there's enough skin in the game or skin in the deal for two people, so then they cash me out at the front at the closing table. So just to let you know. And I can't tell you how many issues were avoided just by putting out that little paragraph. You know, because on some of these deals, you know, I'm negotiating down to the penny, literally. A lot of my deals, they're not clean numbers. It's not like, "Oh, I'll buy your house for $148,000. My deals are like, "I'll buy your house for $148,343.73. Because then to them, it makes it seem like, yeah, shit, Fernando. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to swear. But Fernando can't. He can't go up even one more cent. Like, this is his bottom line, and that's it. Like, that's as much as he can go. And then all of a sudden for them to be like, "Oh, and then Fernando just made $78,000 on top of the price he just negotiated with me." Right. It's rough, you know. It's rough because then they think, "Oh, that's money that could have been in my pocket," and you just have to shift the narrative as if like you're still getting the max amount that you're going to get for this property, but I'm just being cashed out early instead of me getting my profit at the very end. You know, waiting 12 months to flip this. You know.
Yeah, great way.
That helps out a lot.
Yeah. So I can see you're picking up a lot of good techniques from like the negotiation with a motion book, and just like providing sellers and buyers just understanding, just giving them an understanding of exactly what's going down, the role that you're playing in that, what it's going to look like, whether they're selling their property or buying a property from you. And it's super powerful and has been a big key to your success, it seems.
Yeah, and it really comes down to time management. You know, when you're transparent up front, you may lose one deal. Okay, you lose that deal. But that deal was going to be the deal where you're going to have to be trying to hide things from the seller and pretend that the 12 cash buyers that are walking through the property with you on the second showing are all inspectors or something, or insurance adjusters. And then now you're lying, and it's just such a pain. And the amount of time that I have to spend and the stress that comes from having to like try to keep things a secret is not worth it. Just be upfront, be transparent. Most people, it's going to be a lot easier for them to swallow if they already know what's happening, as opposed to the biggest thing is people don't like surprises, you know? And if they get caught by surprise, something that if they were forewarned about, they would have been fine with, but because they're getting caught by surprise, it's one of those things that it can destroy a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing on the offer too, I love how you get the offers down to the like the cent. And I know that you have that awesome offer calculator for like buy and holds or wholesale deals. I don't know if you want to bring that up on this call or not if you have it, but that's definitely cool stuff that I've seen before.
Yeah, I can probably pull it up pretty quick. Let me see here. I'm gonna have to minimize this.
Yeah, I would say pull it up first, and then we can share screen on Zoom.
No problem.
Screen on Zoom.
Tons
of great nuggets here, man. Tons of great nuggets.
So to expand upon that nugget, the reason why is never, for the last 3 digits of an offer price, not including the cents, never make them a 0, a 5, or a 9, because those 3 numbers psychologically make people think that you have room for negotiation or that you're just rounding, so that there's still some room in it. So when you give them an exact number, even down to the cent, it really does help when it comes to saying, yeah, like, this is it. That's it. I'm walking away if you can't do this exact number, and that's usually on the second or the third time I make my initial offer. They say, oh, well, I need to go up, because everybody's going to negotiate, right? So, and I pad the numbers for that. And then, so I say, okay, here's the first offer, and then they counter. And then on the second offer, say, okay, this offer is already too high for me, but I really like you and I really want to help you out. This is literally the highest I can pay, like, to the cent. And if this works for you, great. If not, just let me know and I'll close down your file. And then I love some of your follow-up sequences that are, they start making them visualize, like, so what are you going to do with the money? Are you going to go on vacation? Or that's very powerful, because now you're getting people to mentally already spend the money they haven't even received yet. And then if you decide to, like, oh, I'm going to pull that offer away from you, they're like, no. Okay, I'll take it. Like, come back,
Absolutely.
So let me pull it up here. You got this.
Absolutely. So say that again, Fernando. The 3. That's interesting. The psychological aspect before that. So when you're making an offer to a seller, the last 3 digits, including the last 2 for the cents, you don't want those ending in was that a 1, 5, or a 0, 5, 9?
0, 5, or 9. Because think about it. Anytime you see something for sale, it's either ending in a 0, it's ending in like 995, or it's ending in like 999, right? So that's like, okay, this is clearly not like a number that that we came to with an Excel sheet. And it's funny, because I even say this to myself, hey, listen, like, I totally understand what you're saying. I totally understand everything that you think is adding value to your property, but I'm just it's all numbers for me. I'm going to put it into an Excel sheet. The Excel sheet's going to spit out the maximum we can pay. And then that's it, based on our guidelines. So it's not you versus me. It's you and me versus the Excel sheet. How do we tackle the Excel sheet so that it makes the numbers look right for us?
Yeah, man. Right, transparency. I'm loving it.
All right. So here's one of them. I'm going to pull this up for you right now.
Sweet.
All right. So just share my screen here.
Yeah, it should be share screen, then select desktop. So if you're just on your Mac, it should be select desktop 1.
All right. Do you see it?
Perfect.
All right. So here's the little Excel. This is the second iteration of what I did. The first iteration actually has a lot more power and functionality to it. So this one gets down a little bit more nitty-gritty into the numbers. So everything on the left-hand side here are things that are inputs, anything in blue, right? So do I want to run it as a fix and flip, or do I want to run it as a buy and hold? Because that's going to change my return numbers. Then, because I invest in all 7 counties in the Chicagoland area, I need a way to adjust my return for risk adjusted return. So for example, with all the numbers that are already in this deal, look at what my buy and hold price is for option 1, right? For a B grade area. Now let me turn that to an F area. Look at my cash prices now. 18,000 versus 84, right? So this is the difference between me buying in, like, say, Downers Grove, which is a nice area to raise kids. They have good school districts, versus me buying in Englewood, which is the most dangerous neighborhood in the entire United States, right? And then so you can also run it as a fix and flip and a buy and hold, because some markets, it doesn't make sense to make a buy and hold offer because you're going to be lower than everybody else. So see right now, the buy and hold versus fix and flip, I already see it. The buy and hold price is a little bit lower than fix and flip. This is fine. Now let's say I go to like a D grade area. Now look at how it changes the numbers. I'm obviously going to go for a fix and flip because that's going to make more sense for the seller, and I'll have a greater chance of getting that contract, right? And then so it spits out multiple offers. So you have your cash offer first, depending on what you're doing. Then you have your let's actually go fix and flip. So, and then you have your seller finance offers. So option one's a cash. This is gonna be, and I tell them this on the phone. I say, hey, I'm gonna run the numbers for you, Mr. Seller. And unlike anybody else that you're dealing with, I'm actually gonna give you 3 options to choose from, and they're all gonna vary in price. One is gonna be cash if you want the money right now. One is gonna be a short-term seller finance. All that means is that you're the bank. I'm paying you a down payment and interest, and you're gonna carry that for me for, call it like 12 months. And that way I don't have to go to and then I use, sellers don't know what a hard money lender is. So to make it funny and kind of keep it light, I say, instead of me going to my loan sharks that are going to charge me 15% to buy this property, I'll offer you 4 to 6% and a higher purchase price than you would have received. So can you imagine if a seller, like I offer them $69,000, but then they have another offer that they'll get, $5,000 right now, or I could even increase the down payment to 10 or 20%. And then they're going to get another $30,000 on top of their cash price that all other wholesalers are making. This is how I buy all my rentals, is option 2, anywhere between 12 to 3 months, or 12 to 3 year horizon, 12 month to 3 year horizon. And that's really nice because a lot of the properties that we're buying as wholesalers are distressed. So the in-place cap rate is not what the property is actually worth. But if the seller will carry the note, and you can increase the income and decrease the expenses, and then all of a sudden in 2 years you go to a commercial lender and the commercial lender cashes all your money out and then some, that rental property is now an infinite return for you, and all you had in that deal was $5,000 plus your total debt service, right?
Yeah, no, that's super powerful stuff. And that's what I was like alluding to. Like, that's awesome that you're purchasing all your rentals with the seller finance, but that's kind of what I mentioned at the beginning of the call too, and staying along the subject of being transparent. When you're presenting multiple offers to a seller, you're going to come off as more educated, more experienced, and they just like that. That makes them feel good if they're getting multiple offers.
Yeah,
something a lot of other wholesalers in most markets probably aren't doing.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. It's funny because I've only come in. And another thing that I recommend to every wholesaler is get on every other wholesaler's list. Because you may think you know where the market's priced, but you may not. For example, when I first moved to Chicago, I thought I had to do the ARV times 32%, whatever, minus repairs. Turns out the Chicago market right now is closer to a 25% discount. In some areas, it's closer to a 20% or 18% discount to get it done. And the way I found out about that very easily was just seeing the higher volume wholesalers when I first got here, and where they were pushing out properties and then just calling them 6 months or 6 weeks later, being like, hey, that deal that you had in Auburn Gresham, did you move that deal? What did you move it for? And then I'll do the calculations backwards, and I see what cash buyers are what they're willing to pay and where the market's at. So I think that's super important.
Awesome, man. Well, too many golden nuggets for me to even wrap up here. Any wholesalers, investors out there, people buying apartments, want to learn about acquisitions, running your business SEO, sales, definitely check this out. Fernando even gave his phone number earlier in this interview. I don't know if I'm going to put that in the show notes, but I love connecting.
My phone number is already all over the internet, so it's not gonna add anything extra for me. So feel free. Just make it as easy as possible for people to contact me.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate that. Any closing words that you have for the audience besides that, man? Awesome to have you on. Also, I stay in pretty good communication with you, so always awesome to chat with you.
Thanks, man. I think the only closing words I had is just keep grinding. Real estate's one of those things where it's a roller coaster. You have some big ups, but you have some big downs too. Just push through, and it's going to start paying off as soon as you start getting motivated or the momentum running. I remember for me, it was probably about 2.5 years in is when I really started to see the momentum carrying forward, and I started growing, 50, 100% per year. But in the beginning, it was rough. The first 18 months that I did this, I didn't know if I was going to be able to, even pay my bills, all that credit card debt I first pulled out, so it's good. Finally, I'm debt free and just stick with it. Don't quit before it gets good.
Yeah. Awesome. Debt free, and any debt that you have other people paying it off for you.
Exactly.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, you moved back to Chicago 2.5 years ago, and then the Cubs win a World Series. Coincidence?
I don't think it's a coincidence.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks for hopping on. Are you coming to the mastermind in in October?
No, so I have another conference that I have to be in. So unfortunately, I won't make it this one. But if you guys do another one, I'll be there.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely be doing another one.
Okay.
All right, man. We'll take it easy, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Fernando.
All right, take it easy.
See you, man.